Let's review, shall we? I have about 8 or 9 problems here we want to review. So the first one we want to review, it says find the intercepts and then graph the line 5x plus 2y equals negative 10. So let's try that one. We want to find the intercepts. So if I want to find the intercepts, if I want to find the x-intercept, then we're going to replace the y value with a 0. So 5x plus 2 times 0 equals negative 10. It goes to 0, so it cancels. So 5x equals negative 10. We divide by 5 to undo the multiplication. It turns into a 1. So 1x, or just x, equals negative 2. So the x-intercept lies at negative 2, comma 0. And 0 comes because that's what we plugged in, right? That's the point. So there's our x-intercept. If we want to do the y-intercept, then we're going to do the same thing, just opposite. We're going to put a 0 in for x. So we put the 0 in for x this time. Here we go. And 0 times anything is 0, so essentially it cancels. Divide both sides by 2. That turns into a 1. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. So let's see. The point would be 0, comma, negative 5. And if I want to graph this line, I'm just going to plot those 2 points. Negative 2, 0, there's the x-intercept, 0, negative 5, the y-intercept. And then we draw us a line between those 2 points. There's how we graph it. Cool. Now let's look at circles. Suppose you have a circle whose endpoints of a diameter are given, and you have to come up with the equation of a circle. So the equation of a circle is x minus h squared plus the standard form of a circle, y minus k squared equals r squared, where h and k are the center point, r is the radius. You have neither of those. But here's the thing. A diameter, let's plot those 2 points real quick. We got 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, negative 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, positive 6. That is the diameter of the circle. So a diameter runs right through the middle of a circle. So the middle of that line is the center. So I'm going to guess right about there. So the midpoint of that line, or of that segment, is the center of that circle. So if I find the midpoint given this segment, which ends at these 2 points, I'll find the center. So I want to find the midpoint first, using these 2 points. Midpoint, you take the average of the x's, and then you take the average of the y's. That's going to be your midpoint. It's a point, so I'll write it like a point. So negative 6 plus 2 would be negative 4. And negative 4 divided by 2 would be negative 2. And then 6 plus 0 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the center of our circle is at negative 2, comma 3. And now you can fill in at least part of this equation. At least you know that much. X minus negative 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals r squared. A negative negative is a positive, so I'm going to write that, clean that up. Alright, so now you've got this much of the equation. Well, you could go back up here and use the distance formula to find out what the radius is, because the circle, that's like this. That's a horrible looking circle, but the radius is this size right here, right? That's the radius. You could use the center out to the edge here. We're using the distance formula. You could use the distance formula between those 2 points to find the diameter and then take half of it. I just assume this point right here, and I can do this at either point. I can plug this into this equation because it's on the circle. This point should work in this equation because that point is on the circle. So if I do that, I'm just going to plug the x value and y value in here at these 2 points, at this 1 point. Now all I have is r squared, and it'll tell me what my r squared value is now. So 4 squared plus negative 3 squared equals r squared. That's 16 plus 9 equals r squared. So 25r squared. So the equation of this circle, and now I know the r squared value now. Sorry. You get 16 and 9 equals r squared, then you add them together. So the radius here is 25. So the actual equation here, let's just take we'll just rewrite it out. X plus 2 squared y minus 3 squared equals 25. Okay, let's do another circle problem. Oh, by the way, r squared is 25, so if someone asks you what the radius was, it's not 25, right? It's r squared equals 25. So that means that the radius was actually 5. That's just if somebody asks. It might not come up in this little. Might not come up. Who knows? Okay, you've got another circle whose center is at 714. I'm sorry, 14 comma 7. So you go over 14. All right, 1 over 14. Go up 7. That's the center of the circle. It's tangent to the x-axis. It's tangent to the x-axis, which is this axis, right? That's the x-axis. So this circle is tangent to the x-axis, so it just touches the x-axis in one spot. That's what that means. So that's the circle. It just touches in one spot right there. They share that same spot. So what's the equation of this circle? Well, we know the center. X minus 14 squared y minus 7 squared equals, well, what's the radius? Well, right there it is. And we counted. That's 7. So 7 squared. And just go ahead and multiply that out. If it says that it is tangent to the x-axis, the y-coordinate is the radius. And it's vice versa. So if this had said tangent to the y-axis, that means that the x-coordinate, the 14, would have been the radius in that scenario. The circle would have been huge. It would have been a really big circle. Okay, so there's our answer to that one. Here we've got another circle question. It's given to you this, this is not in standard form. It's an equation of a circle, and it asks for what is the center and what is the radius. So the center and the radius. So what I have to do is complete the square. It's kind of the idea here. So we're going to put the x's together. I'm just going to rearrange it so it looks a little bit nicer. So just put the x's together and the y's together. I didn't move over the equal sign, so I don't have to change any signs or anything. Now to complete the square, you go ahead and write this down, okay? And you take half that number. Half the 10 is positive 5. So it's plus 5, automatically plus 5. Now take 5 and square it and add it to the other side. I have a link about what's going on here with these completing the squares. I have a video. I'll put a link here on this video, or you can go back through my playlist and check it out. It's completing the square. So you automatically do this, and you take half that number, which is 2. You take that number and square it and add it over here. So 52 plus 25 plus 4 is 81. So I know I've junked that up a little bit here. Let's write it out. X plus 5 squared plus y plus 2 squared equals 81. If you multiply this out and multiply this out, and then you can manipulate this to where it'll look exactly like that. So now we've got everything. The center is at -5 comma -2. Remember how it will opposite right? The signs are opposite, center of a circle. And this is not, the radius is not 81. The radius squared is 81. So take a square root. The radius is 9. Okay, so we've got it in standard form. That's how we figure that out. All right, enough about circles. Let's do a piecewise. Let's do a piecewise function. Here it says find f of -1. That's what we're trying to do, and it gives you a piecewise function. So it's two functions. If your x values are less than or equal to -1, you're going to use the top. If your x values that you're working with are greater than -1, you're going to use this bottom. So it's a split personality, so to speak. So this x value that we're working with is -1, and -1 is equal to -1. So we're going to use this top one. We're not going to use the bottom. So first thing you do is take that number and compare it over here and figure out which one you use. You only do this in one. Only do it in one. So we're going to do it in this one right here. So 4 times -1, -4. So that means f of -1 is -4. It's that easy. They're not that tough to do. Now, if you're trying to graph it, so let's graph this bad boy. For x is less than, if x is less than or equal to 2, you're going to use this graph. You're going to graph this. If the x values are greater than 2, you're going to use this function. So over here at 2 is where everything changes. So I'm going to put this little line in pencil here at x equals 2. That's kind of the line in the sand, so to speak. The graph is going to change from this graph to this one at this vertical line. Okay, so first off, I'm going to graph for, see, x is less than 2. So y equals 4 minus x goes on this side of the line. That's where the values are less than 2. The x values are less than 2 going this way. And then the x values are greater than 2 going this way, which is going to be the graph of y equals 1 minus 3x. Now when I graph, I just graph using the slope and the y-intercept. So the slope here is -1, and the y-intercept is at 4. So there's the y-intercept at 4, and then we'll go down 1 over 1, because that's the slope, -1. And then I've got this line. Now it's not going to go all the way across, it's just going to go to here. It's not going to go past that. It goes out forever this way. Now this says equal to's, so when I stop this line, I'm going to put a solid dot right there. Right there. Okay, so I got a solid dot right there. Now, the other way, 1 minus 3x. So this y-intercept is at 1. So there's the y-intercept for that. The slope is -3, so I go down 3 and then over 1. There's the other point. So there's where this graph is. Now, I'm not going to draw it on this side of the line. Right? I'm going to start right here. This graph has to be on this side of the line. So I just use those points to line it up with my ruler here to draw that part of the line. And since it says just a greater than, no equal to's, right? No, there's no equal to part to it. I have an open dot right there. So there's my graph. If you have any questions, I think I've covered all this stuff in my playlist, but I'll try to link it as well throughout the video. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Almost forgot. A couple questions about domain and functions. So first off, determine whether the graph is a function. You're given a graph here, and it's a little oval. Remember, we have what's called a vertical line test. And this hits twice. A vertical line hits twice, it is not a function. Vertical line test. If it hits twice, it's not a function. So what about circles are not functions? What about a parabola? You can draw a vertical line anywhere, it will not hit twice. So yes, it is a function. Alright, now we've got this guy here. It's just this little line, a segment, and it asks to find the domain and range. So if I want to find the domain, remember the domain is all the inputs or all the x values. Alright, so what are all the x values being used here? Looks like it goes from -3 to 2. From -3 to 2. But there's an open dot here at the 2 value, so we use a parentheses. There's a closed dot here at the -3, so use a square bracket. And we're always going to put the lowest on the left, highest on the right. There's the domain. Now the range, remember the range is all the y values, or all the outputs. So what are all the y values being used? I'm just going to trace out the y values here. Looks like it goes from -1, the lowest, to the highest of 4. And it looks like an open dot on the 4 and a closed dot on the 1. Domain and range. Okay, now, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.